The maintenance tunnel was dark and narrow. Most workers on Horizon's Edge station avoided these spaces. The ceilings were too low. The walls pressed in too close. But for Yuna, it was perfect. She moved through the tunnel like a shadow, her small hands working quickly on a broken power line. At 4 feet and 2 inches tall, she was considered tiny by galactic standards. Her skin was pale gray, her eyes large and dark, and her fingers were thin but strong. She was Kova, and in this universe, that meant she was nothing. Horizon's Edge was a massive space station where dozens of alien species lived and worked together. The Galactic Coalition ran everything here. They had rules for everything, and the most important rule was simple. The bigger you were, the more you mattered. The Rethians stood over 8 feet tall. They commanded fleets and made laws. The Vorath were 7 feet of muscle and teeth. They served as soldiers and guards. Even the humans, who were average in size, held engineering and medical positions that earned respect. But the Kova, they cleaned. They fixed broken things in places no one else could reach. They were invisible. Yuna finished her repair and wiped her hands on her worn uniform. The power line hummed back to life. No one would thank her for this. No one would even know she had done it. That was how things worked. She crawled out of the tunnel and stepped into a wide corridor. Bright lights made her blink. Tall figures walked past her without looking down. A Rethian officer nearly stepped on her foot. He did not apologize. He did not even notice. Yuna pressed herself against the wall and waited for the crowd to pass. This was her life. Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay out of the way. She had been on this station for 3 years. In that time, she had spoken to perhaps a dozen people, and most of those conversations were just other workers giving her orders. Fix this. Clean that. Move faster. Her name was written in the station records, but she doubted anyone had ever read it. Sometimes, late at night, when she was alone in her tiny room, Yuna wondered if she would simply disappear one day and no one would notice. The thought did not make her sad anymore. She had accepted it long ago. She made her way to the lower decks, where the Kova quarters were located. The hallways here were smaller, the lights dimmer. This was where the forgotten people lived. She passed a few other Kova along the way. They nodded at her, but did not speak. Words felt heavy when you had been silent for so long. Her room was barely big enough for a bed and a small desk. She sat down and stared at the metal wall. Another day finished. Another day of being nothing. Then her communicator beeped. A new assignment. Yuna read the message. A panel on Deck 7 needed repair. Deck 7 was where the new arrivals stayed. Important people, scientists and engineers from distant worlds. She would have to be extra careful not to be seen. She gathered her tools and made her way up through the station. The corridors grew wider and brighter as she climbed. The people here walked with confidence. They laughed and talked loudly. Yuna kept her head down and moved along the edges. Deck 7 was busy. A transport ship had arrived that morning, bringing fresh workers from across the galaxy. Yuna found the broken panel near a row of living quarters. She knelt down and began her work. The panel was old. Wires had come loose and circuits had burned out. It would take time to fix properly. Yuna lost herself in the work, her fingers moving with practiced ease. She did not notice the door behind her open. A man stepped out. He was human, with dark hair and kind eyes. He wore the uniform of an engineer, and his name tag read Tay. He was not especially tall by human standards, maybe 5 feet and 9 inches, but to Yuna he seemed like a giant. He noticed her immediately. "Oh, hello," he said. Yuna froze. People did not say hello to her. People did not see her at all. She turned slowly, her large eyes wide with surprise. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "I will be finished soon. I did not mean to disturb." Tay smiled. It was a warm smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "You are not disturbing anything. I just got here today, still figuring out where everything is." Yuna did not know what to say. She was not prepared for conversation. She turned back to the panel, hoping he would leave. But Tay did not leave. He crouched down beside her, watching her work with genuine interest. "That looks complicated. How long have you been doing this kind of work?" "3 years," Yuna said quietly. 3 years? You must know this station better than anyone." No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Yuna felt a strange warmth in her chest, something she had not felt in a long time. She was not sure if it was happiness or fear. "I know the small places," she said, "the places others cannot go." Tay nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds important." "Every system needs someone who understands the parts no one else can reach." Yuna finished her repair and stood up. The panel hummed with fresh power. She gathered her tools and prepared to leave. "Thank you," Tai said. Yuna stopped. She turned to look at him, confusion clear on her face. "For what?" "For fixing the panel. For doing your job." He shrugged. "It seems like the right thing to say." Yuna did not respond. She simply nodded and walked away, her heart beating faster than normal. She could feel his eyes on her back as she left, but for once, being seen did not feel dangerous. That night, alone in her room, Yuna sat in the darkness for a long time. She thought about the human engineer and his strange kindness. She thought about the way he had looked at her, not through her. And then something happened that had not happened in years. Her eyes began to glow. A soft light, pale blue, flickered in the darkness. Yuna gasped and pressed her hands over her face. The light faded slowly, leaving her trembling. She had buried this part of herself so deep, she thought it was gone forever. But it was still there, waiting. The power her people had been forced to forget. The strength the galaxy had tried to erase. Yuna lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 3 years, she did not feel invisible. She felt afraid. Tay had been on Horizon's edge for 1 week, and he had already learned the unspoken rules. Walk on the right side of the corridor when a Rethian approaches. Do not make eye contact with the Vorath guards. Never question Commander Vorn. But there was one rule Tay could not follow. He could not ignore the small gray people who lived in the shadows. Every day, he saw them. In the corners of rooms, in the maintenance tunnels, in the spaces between machines. The Kova moved like ghosts, doing the work that kept the station alive. And every day, everyone else pretended they did not exist. Tay found this strange. On Earth, people had learned long ago that size meant nothing. Some of the greatest warriors in human history had been small. Some of the most dangerous creatures on Earth were tiny. A single bee could kill a man twice its size if it stung in the right place. Humans knew better than to judge by appearance. He thought about the Kova woman he had met on his first day. Yuna. He had learned her name from the station records. She had been working on this station for 3 years, longer than most other repair workers. Her performance reports were excellent, and yet she lived in the smallest room on the lowest deck. Tay made a decision. He would find her again. It took him 3 days. Yuna was good at staying hidden, but Tay was patient, and eventually he spotted her in the engineering bay, fixing a coolant pipe that hung above a row of machines. She was balanced on a narrow beam, her small body perfectly steady. Her hands moved with the skill of someone who had done this work 1,000 times. Tay watched in quiet admiration. When she finished, she climbed down and found him standing nearby. Her eyes went wide. "You are following me," she said. It was not a question. Tay smiled. "I wanted to see you work. You are very good." Yuna did not know how to respond to compliments. She looked down at her feet. "I do my job. That is all." "That is not all. I have been watching the other repair workers. None of them move like you do. None of them care as much." Yuna felt heat rise to her face. She was not used to this. Attention made her nervous. "Why do you talk to me? The others do not." Tay leaned against a machine and crossed his arms. "Maybe that is the problem. Maybe someone should." Before Yuna could answer, a loud voice echoed through the engineering bay. "What is this?" Commander Vorn stood in the doorway. He was enormous, over 8 feet tall, with blue-gray skin and eyes like cold steel. His uniform was covered in medals and symbols of rank. He was the highest authority on Horizon's edge, and everyone feared him. His eyes moved from Tay to Yuna. His lip curled in disgust. "You," he said, pointing at Yuna. "What are you doing in here? This area is restricted to senior personnel." Yuna's voice was barely a whisper. "I was repairing the coolant pipe, Commander. I was assigned this task." "I do not care what you were assigned. You should have finished faster. You do not belong here." Tay stepped forward. "Commander, she was doing her job. The repair was complicated, and she handled it well." Vorn turned his cold gaze to Tay. "You are the new human engineer." "Tay, yes? I have heard about you. Smart. Skilled." His eyes narrowed, but clearly foolish. "You should not waste your time speaking to the Kova. They are workers, tools, nothing more." Yuna stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the floor. She had heard these words before. She had heard them her whole life, but somehow, hearing them now, in front of Tay, hurt more than usual. Tay's jaw tightened. "With respect, Commander, I disagree. Every person on this station contributes to its function. Without workers like her, the systems would fail." Vorn laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You are young. You will learn. The galaxy has a natural order. The strong lead. The weak serve. The Kova are small and powerless. They exist to do what we cannot be bothered to do ourselves." He glanced at Yuna with open contempt. "Now get out of my sight, little creature, before I have you reassigned to waste processing." Yuna moved quickly, slipping past the commander and disappearing into the corridor. Tay watched her go, anger burning in his chest. Vorn placed a heavy hand on Tay's shoulder. "A word of advice, human. Do not let sympathy cloud your judgment. The Kova are not worth your concern. They have no power, no importance, no future. They are too short to matter." He walked away, his footsteps echoing like thunder. Tay stood alone in the engineering bay for a long time. His hands were shaking with anger. He had seen cruelty before, but never so casual, never so accepted. That evening, he found Hana in the medical bay. She was his oldest friend, a fellow human who had arrived on the station months before him. She was organizing medical supplies when he walked in. "You look upset," she said, reading his face immediately. Tay told her everything. The Kova worker, Commander Vorn, the way everyone treated an entire species like they were worthless. Hana listened quietly. When he finished, she sighed. "I have seen it too," she said. "The Kova come to the medical bay sometimes, When they are injured, they always apologize for taking my time. They always try to leave before I can fully treat them. She shook her head. It breaks my heart. How can everyone accept this? Tay asked. How can they just ignore an entire people? Hannah looked at him with sad eyes. Because it is easier. Because if they admitted the Kova mattered, they would have to change everything. The whole system would fall apart. Tay was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice firm. On Earth, we learned something important. We learned that underestimating someone because of their size is a deadly mistake. Small things can be powerful. Small things can change the world. Hannah nodded slowly. I believe you. But convincing the rest of the galaxy will not be easy. I am not trying to convince the galaxy, Tay said. I am just trying to help one person. Neither of them noticed the small figure standing in the doorway. Yuna had come to the medical bay to treat a cut on her hand. She had planned to slip in quietly, take what she needed, and leave without being seen. But she had heard everything. She stood frozen, Tay's words echoing in her mind. Small things can be powerful. Small things can change the world. A feeling stirred in her chest. It was not quite hope. It was something older, something deeper. A memory of who her people used to be. A whisper of power, long buried. Yuna slipped away before they could see her. But as she walked through the dark corridors toward her room, she carried those words with her like a small flame in the darkness. For the first time in years, she did not feel entirely alone. Yuna began to open up slowly, like a flower that had been waiting for sunlight. Over the following weeks, she and Tay met often, sometimes in the engineering bay, sometimes in the quiet corners of the station where no one else went. She was still nervous around him, still waiting for the moment when he would turn cold like everyone else. But that moment never came. One evening, they sat together in a small observation room on the lower decks. Through the window, distant stars burned against the blackness of space. It was peaceful here, silent, safe. Tell me about your people, Tay said gently. I have read the station records, but they do not say much. Where do the Kova come from? Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Her dark eyes reflected the starlight. Our homeworld was called Kova Prime. It was beautiful, they say. Green forests and silver lakes. But I never saw it. It was destroyed before I was born. Destroyed? How? A war. The records say it was attacked by raiders. But my mother told me a different story. Yuna's voice dropped to a whisper. She said the coalition let it happen. She said they wanted us gone. Tay frowned. Why would the coalition want to destroy your planet? Yuna did not answer immediately. She seemed to be struggling with something, deciding how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke. Because we were not always like this. We were not always small in their eyes. She turned to face him, and in the dim light, Tay saw something in her expression. Something ancient and sad. The Kova were once guardians, she said, protectors of the coalition. We had abilities that other species did not understand. Powers of the mind. We could move objects without touching them. We could feel the thoughts of others. We could create shields that stopped weapons. The coalition used us to keep peace across the galaxy. Tay stared at her. You are talking about psychic powers, telekinesis, telepathy. Yes, but we called it the inner light. It was sacred to us, a gift from our ancestors. Yuna's hands trembled slightly. But the other species grew afraid. They saw how strong we were and they feared us. So they decided to eliminate us. Not all at once. That would be too obvious. They did it slowly. They destroyed our homeworld and scattered our people. They erased our history from the records. They told the galaxy that we were weak and worthless, and eventually we began to believe it ourselves. Tay felt cold. They erased your history? Your abilities? Generation after generation, we forgot. Our children were never taught to use the inner light. The knowledge was lost. Now we are just maintenance workers, cleaners, invisible. A single tear rolled down Yuna's gray cheek. My mother remembered some things. She taught me in secret, before she died, but I have kept it buried for so long. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if they knew, they would finish what they started. They would destroy the rest of us. Tay reached out and took her small hand in his. Her skin was cool, but he could feel something beneath it. A faint vibration. A hint of power waiting to wake up. I will not tell anyone, he said. But I need to know more. I need to understand. Yuna nodded slowly. There is someone. An elder. His name is Kai. He lives in the deepest part of the lower decks. He knows the old stories better than anyone alive, but he does not trust outsiders. Will he trust me? I do not know, but I can take you to him. The next day, Yuna led Tay through a maze of narrow corridors and forgotten passages. They went deeper into the station than Tay had ever been. The lights grew dimmer. The air grew colder. Finally, they reached a door that looked older than anything else on the station. Yuna knocked 3 times. A long pause. Then the door opened. Kai was old. His gray skin was wrinkled and spotted with age. His eyes were clouded but still sharp. He looked at Tay with deep suspicion. A human, Kai said. His voice was rough but steady. Why have you brought a human here, child? He is different, Yuna said. He sees us. He listens. Kai studied Tay for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and let them enter. The room was small and filled with strange objects. Old books written in languages Tay did not recognize. Crystals that seemed to glow with faint light. Paintings of landscapes that must have been Kova Prime. Ki sat down on a worn cushion and gestured for them to do the same. You want to know about the Kova, he said to Tay. It was not a question. You want to know why we are treated like insects beneath the boots of giants. Yes, Tay said. Yuna told me some things, but I want to understand everything. Kai laughed bitterly. Everything would take years, but I will tell you what matters. He leaned forward, his clouded eyes burning with old anger. We were not always small in their eyes. We were guardians. We protected the coalition for 1,000 years. Our power was so great that entire armies would flee at the sight of a single Kova warrior. We could stop ships with our minds. We could crush weapons into dust. We were the shield that protected the galaxy. What happened? Tay asked. Fear happened. The other species saw our power and they were afraid. They held secret meetings. They made plans. And then, one night, they came for us. Kai's voice grew heavy with grief. They bombed our homeworld. They killed millions in a single night. They called it a tragedy, a disaster. But it was murder. And then they erased us from history. They told everyone that we were weak, that we had always been weak. And slowly, over generations, our own children forgot the truth. Tay felt sick. How could they hide something so big? It is easy to hide the truth when you control all the records, when you control what children learn, when you tell the same lie for long enough. It becomes truth. Kai looked at Yuna with something like pride. But some of us remember. Some of us kept the old knowledge alive, passed down in whispers from parent to child. The inner light is not gone. It is only sleeping. Yuna spoke quietly. I have felt it. The power. It comes to me sometimes when I am afraid or angry, but I do not know how to control it. Kai nodded. The power is still in your blood, in all of us. It only needs to be awakened. He turned to Tay. And you, human. Why do you care? What does our suffering mean to you? Tay thought carefully before answering. On my world, we have a long history of people being crushed because others thought they were small and weak. We learned through much pain that this was always wrong. Every person has value. Every person can surprise you. He met Key's eyes. I do not know if I can change anything, but I can refuse to look away. I can refuse to accept the lie. Key was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. Perhaps there is hope yet, he said. Perhaps the galaxy is not entirely lost. As they left Key's room, Yuna walked beside Tay in silence. Then, without warning, a loud crash echoed from a nearby corridor. A heavy cargo container had broken free from its straps and was falling directly toward Tay. He did not have time to move, but Yuna did. Her eyes flashed with pale blue light. Her hand shot out, and the container stopped in midair, inches from Tay's head. For 3 heartbeats, it hung there, suspended by nothing visible. Then Yuna lowered her hand, and the container drifted gently to the ground. Tay stared at her, his heart pounding. Yuna looked at her own hands, breathing hard. The light in her eyes faded slowly. It is waking up, she whispered. The power. It is waking up. And in that moment, they both knew that everything was about to change. The alarm shattered the silence like breaking glass. Red lights flashed across every corridor of Horizon's edge. The station's computer voice echoed through the halls, cold and mechanical. Warning. Unknown vessels approaching. All personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Tay was in the engineering bay when the alarm sounded. He dropped his tools and ran toward the observation deck, where crowds of workers were already gathering. Through the massive window, he saw something that made his blood turn cold. Ships. Dozens of them. They were black and jagged, like pieces of broken shadow. They moved through space in perfect formation, surrounding the station like predators circling prey. What are those? Someone whispered. An older Rethian officer stepped forward, his face pale with fear. The Veth, he said. But that is impossible. The Veth have been extinct for centuries. Tay had never heard of the Veth, but the terror in the officer's voice told him everything he needed to know. These were not traders. These were not diplomats. These were killers. Commander Vorn's voice came over the station's communication system. All combat personnel. Report to defensive positions. This station will not fall. Prepare for battle. The next hour was chaos. The Veth attacked with savage speed. Their ships tore through the station's outer defenses like they were made of paper. Energy beams cut through walls. Explosions rocked the corridors. The station shook and groaned as if it were alive and dying. Tay ran through the madness, searching for Hana and Yuna. He found Hana in the medical bay, already treating wounded soldiers. Her hands were covered in blood, but her eyes were steady. The Veth are boarding, she said quickly. They are inside the station. Reports say they are killing everyone they find. We need to evacuate the civilians. Where is Yuna? Tay asked. Hana shook her head. I have not seen her. She could be anywhere. Tay's heart clenched with fear. The lower decks, where the Kova lived, were some of the least protected areas of the station. If the Veth reached them first, there would be no one to help. "I am going to find her," Tay said. "Tay, wait!" Hana grabbed his arm. "You cannot go alone. It is too dangerous." "I am not leaving her behind. Help the wounded. I will be back." He ran. The corridors were filled with smoke and fire. Bodies lay on the ground, some moving, some still. Tay saw Rethian soldiers fighting hand-to-hand with creatures from Nightmare. The Veth were tall and thin, with gray skin and no eyes. Their mouths were full of needle-sharp teeth, and they moved with terrible speed. Even the strongest Rethian warriors were struggling against them. This was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Tay pushed through the chaos, dodging debris and weapon fire. He reached the lower decks and found them in ruins. Walls had collapsed. Power lines sparked and hissed. The air was thick with dust and fear. He called Yuna's name again and again, but there was no answer. Finally, he reached her room. The door was open. Inside, her few possessions were scattered on the floor, but she was not there. Tay felt despair rising in his chest. Where could she be? Then he heard something, a faint sound coming from deeper in the lower decks. A humming, a vibration that he felt more than heard. He followed it. The sound led him through a maze of damaged corridors until he reached a large open space. It was a cargo bay, mostly empty now, and in the center of it stood Yuna. She was surrounded by Veth. There were 5 of them, their eyeless faces turned toward her. They were making a strange clicking sound, communicating in a language Tay could not understand. They moved slowly, circling her like wolves around a lamb. Yuna stood completely still. Her eyes were closed. Her small hands were pressed together in front of her chest. She looked calm, almost peaceful. Tay wanted to scream. He wanted to rush in and save her, but he had no weapon. He had no power. What could he possibly do against 5 Veth? One of the Veth lunged. Yuna's eyes snapped open. Blue light exploded from her body. It was blinding, beautiful, and terrible. The Veth that had lunged was thrown backward so hard that it crashed through the cargo bay wall and disappeared. The other 4 staggered, their clicking growing frantic. Yuna raised her hand. The air around her shimmered like heat rising from hot metal. Her voice, when she spoke, was not her own. It was older, deeper, full of ancient power. "You should not have come here," another Veth charged. Yuna did not move. She simply looked at it, and it stopped. It hung in the air, frozen, its limbs twitching. Then, with a small gesture from Yuna, it flew apart. Not exploded, not destroyed. Simply came apart, piece by piece, like a machine being disassembled. The remaining 3 Veth fled. They ran with the same speed they had used to attack, but now it was the speed of terror. They disappeared into the corridors, leaving Yuna alone. Tay stood at the edge of the cargo bay, unable to move. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing like this, nothing close to this. Yuna turned to look at him. The blue light faded from her eyes. For a moment, she looked like herself again, small, quiet, afraid. Then she collapsed. Tay ran to her and caught her before she hit the ground. She was unconscious but breathing. Her skin was hot, as if she had a fever. He could feel energy still crackling beneath her surface, like electricity waiting to discharge. He carried her through the ruined corridors, back toward the medical bay. Around him, the battle continued. Explosions, screams, the sound of weapons fire. But Tay focused only on the small woman in his arms. When he reached the medical bay, Hana rushed to help him. They laid Yuna on a bed, and Hana began checking her vital signs. "What happened to her?" Hana asked. Tai shook his head, still in shock. "I do not know how to explain it. She has power, real power. She destroyed 5 Veth like they were nothing." Hana stared at him. "That is impossible. I saw it. With my own eyes." A new explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered. Through the windows, they could see more Veth ships arriving. The battle was getting worse. Commander Vorn's voice came over the communication system again, but this time it was different. There was fear in it. Real fear. "All personnel, fall back to the central hub. I repeat, fall back to the central hub. Our outer defenses have failed. The Veth are overwhelming us. We cannot hold them back." Tay looked at Yuna's unconscious face. Then he looked at the chaos around them. The station was dying. The soldiers were failing. Everything the coalition had built was crumbling. But Tay had seen something that gave him hope. He had seen a small, forgotten woman destroy monsters with a wave of her hand. He had seen power that the galaxy had tried to erase. The Kova were not weak. They had never been weak. They had only been sleeping. And now, whether she was ready or not, Yuna was waking up. Hana put her hand on Tai's shoulder. "What do we do?" Tay looked at her with fierce determination in his eyes. "We survive. We protect her. And when she wakes up, we let her finish this." Outside, the Veth continued their assault. But deep in the medical bay, a small woman lay unconscious, dreaming of blue light and ancient power. The galaxy had forgotten what the Kova could do. It was about to remember. Yuna woke to the sound of screaming. Her eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. White lights. Medical equipment. She was in the medical bay. Her body felt strange, like she had been filled with fire and then emptied again. She remembered everything. The Veth. The blue light. The feeling of power rushing through her veins like a river breaking through a dam. She sat up quickly, ignoring the dizziness that followed. Tay was beside her immediately, his face filled with relief and concern. "You are awake," he said. "Thank the stars. You have been unconscious for almost 2 hours." 2 hours? Yuna looked around. The medical bay was crowded with wounded soldiers and civilians. Hana moved between them, treating injuries with quick, practiced hands. Through the walls, Yuna could hear explosions and weapons fire. "The battle. Is it still happening?" Tay's expression darkened. "It is worse. The Veth have taken most of the station. Commander Vorn ordered everyone to fall back to the central hub, but we are surrounded. They are breaking through our last defenses." Yuna swung her legs off the bed and stood up. Her body trembled, but she forced herself to stay upright. "I have to help." "Yuna, wait." Tay grabbed her arm gently. "What you did in the cargo bay, that was incredible, but it almost killed you. You need to rest." "There is no time to rest." Yuna looked at him, and there was something different in her eyes now. A clarity that had not been there before. A sense of purpose. "My whole life, I have been hiding from everyone, hiding from myself. I let them make me believe I was nothing, but I am not nothing, and neither are my people." She walked toward the door. Tay followed. "Where are you going?" "To end this." The corridors near the central hub were filled with the sounds of desperate battle. Rethian soldiers fought with everything they had, but the Veth kept coming. They were relentless, fearless. For every one that fell, 2 more took its place. Commander Vorn stood at the front lines, his massive body blocking a corridor entrance. His uniform was torn and bloody. His eyes were wild with exhaustion and fear. Even now, even facing death, he refused to retreat. But it was not enough. Nothing was enough. Yuna walked through the chaos like she was walking through a dream. Soldiers stared at her as she passed. Some tried to stop her. Others simply watched with confusion. "What is that Kova doing here?" someone shouted. "Get her to safety!" But Yuna did not stop. She walked until she reached the front line, where the Veth were pouring through a breach in the wall. She walked until she was standing directly in their path. Vorn saw her. His eyes went wide. "You! Maintenance worker! What are you doing? You will be killed!" Yuna did not look at him. She looked at the Veth. Dozens of them. Their eyeless faces turned toward her. Their needle teeth clicked hungrily. "They forgot what we are," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, steady. "It is time to remember." She closed her eyes. The power came easier this time. It rose from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that had been locked away for generations. It flowed through her blood, through her bones, through every cell of her small body. She felt connected to something ancient and vast, a river of light that stretched back through centuries of her people. When she opened her eyes, they burned with blue fire. The Veth charged, all of them at once, a wave of gray bodies and sharp teeth. Yuna raised her hands. The wave broke. Energy exploded from her in a massive pulse. It was not violent. It was not chaotic. It was precise. Controlled. The Veth were lifted off their feet and thrown backward. Some crashed into walls. Some flew through the breach they had created and tumbled out into space. Some simply stopped existing, their bodies dissolving into dust. The soldiers around Yuna stood frozen. Commander Vorn's mouth hung open. No one moved. No one spoke. Yuna lowered her hands and began to walk forward. More Veth came. They poured from every corridor, every broken window, every hole in the station's wounded body. And Yuna met them all. She moved through the station like a force of nature. Where she walked, the Veth fell. She did not fight them in any traditional sense. She simply looked at them, raised her hand, and they were gone. Shields of blue light protected the civilians she passed. Broken walls sealed themselves as she commanded the debris to move. Fires extinguished at her will. It was not a battle anymore. It was a demonstration, and she was not alone. Across the station, something incredible was happening. Other Kova, dozens of them, were waking up. They felt Yuna's power calling to them, stirring something deep in their blood that they had never understood. A Kova janitor in the lower decks suddenly found himself lifting a collapsed beam with his mind, freeing trapped civilians. A Kova cook in the mess hall raised her hands and created a shield that stopped Veth weapons cold. An old Kova man, half-blind and barely able to walk, reached out with his thoughts and crushed a Veth squad that had cornered a group of children. The inner light was spreading. The Kova were remembering. Tay followed Yuna as closely as he could. He was not powerful. He could not fight like she could. But he could help. He pulled wounded soldiers to safety. He guided frightened civilians to shelter. He shouted warnings when Veth approached from unexpected angles. And he watched. He watched as the woman he had befriended, the small gray worker that everyone had ignored, became something magnificent. Yuna reached the main corridor that led to the station's outer hull. This was where the Veth were entering in the largest numbers. Their ships were docked to the station's skin, pumping warriors into the breach like poison into a wound. She stopped walking. Dozens of Veth stood before her. Behind them, she could see their ships through the torn metal. Beyond that, the black emptiness of space. For a moment, everything was still. Then the Veth attacked. They came from all sides. They were fast and brutal, and they had no fear. But Yuna had no fear either. Not anymore. She raised both hands above her head. The blue light around her grew brighter, brighter, brighter still. It was blinding. It filled the corridor like a small sun. Then she brought her hands down. The explosion of power was like nothing anyone had ever seen. It swept through the corridor, through the breach, through the Veth ships docked outside. It was a wave of pure force, burning with inner light. The Veth simply vanished. One moment they existed. The next, they did not. Their ships crumpled like paper. They broke away from the station and tumbled into space, lifeless and ruined. When the light faded, Yuna stood alone in a corridor filled with silence. The breach began to seal itself as metal twisted and reformed under her will. The air pressure stabilized. The emergency systems kicked in. She turned around. Tay stood at the end of the corridor, his face covered in dust and sweat. Behind him, soldiers and civilians stared at her with expressions of pure shock. Commander Vorn pushed through the crowd. He approached Yuna slowly, like he was approaching something dangerous and sacred. When he reached her, he stopped. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he lowered his head. "I was wrong," he said. His voice was rough, broken. "I was wrong about everything." Yuna looked at him. She was exhausted. Her body was trembling with the effort of what she had done. But her eyes were clear. "You were not the only one," she said quietly. "But that ends today." She walked past him, toward Tay. When she reached him, her legs finally gave out. He caught her and held her up. "Is it over?" she asked. Tay looked at the sealed breach, at the destroyed Veth ships floating in space, at the other Kova scattered across the station, their eyes still glowing faintly with awakened power. "Not yet," he said. "But we are winning. Because of you." Yuna smiled weakly. "Not just me. All of us. My people remembered who they are." Tay smiled back. "The galaxy is going to have to remember too." And somewhere in the darkness of space, the remaining Veth fleet watched their forward force disappear. For the first time in their long, violent history, they hesitated. Something had changed. Something small had become powerful, and they did not know how to fight it. The Veth did not retreat. They regrouped. Within an hour of Yuna's devastating strike, the enemy fleet pulled back to a safe distance. They did not leave. They orbited the station like sharks circling wounded prey, watching, waiting, and then, slowly, they began to move again. This time, they did not send ordinary soldiers. This time, they sent their commander. Tay saw it first on the observation deck monitors. A single ship, much larger than the others, broke away from the fleet. It was black as the void itself, covered in sharp angles and strange symbols. It approached the station with terrible purpose. "What is that?" Hana asked, standing beside him. Her medical coat was stained with blood from the many wounded she had treated. Commander Vorn stepped forward. His face was gray with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with stubborn determination. "The Veth command vessel. Their leader is on that ship." "Why would their leader come personally?" Tai asked. Vorn shook his head. "The Veth have always been savage, but they were never stupid. They would not risk their commander unless they believed they could win." His jaw tightened. "They must know about the Kova, about the psychic powers. They are sending something that can fight back." The command vessel docked at the station's main port. The damaged hull groaned under the weight. Emergency systems screamed warnings that no one could respond to. Then the airlock opened. The Veth commander was unlike any of its kind. It was massive, almost 8 feet tall, with 4 long arms and a body covered in thick armor plating. Its head was larger than a normal Veth, and where other Veth had no eyes, this one had a single glowing red orb in the center of its face. But the most terrifying thing about it was the energy that surrounded it. Dark, cold, visible only as a shimmer in the air. This creature had power, psychic power. Not like the Kova. This was something twisted, something hungry. It walked into the station alone. Yuna felt it immediately. She was resting in the medical bay, trying to recover her strength, when a wave of cold washed over her. It was like ice being poured directly into her mind. She stood up. "It is here." Tay was at her side in an instant. "What is here?" "The leader, the one controlling them all." Yuna closed her eyes, reaching out with her senses. She could feel the Veth commander moving through the station. She could feel its dark energy crushing everything it touched. 2 Rethian soldiers tried to stop it. She felt their minds go silent, snuffed out like candles. "I have to face it," Yuna said. "No." Tay grabbed her shoulders. "You are not strong enough yet. You nearly died last time. If I do not stop it, everyone dies." Yuna looked at him with steady eyes. "This is why my people were feared, Tay. This is what the Coalition tried to erase. Not because we were dangerous to innocents, because we could fight things like this." She gently removed his hands from her shoulders. "Stay here. Protect the wounded. I am coming with you." "Tay, you cannot fight this thing. You have no power." Tay's jaw hardened. "Maybe not, but I can stand beside you. That is what humans do. We do not abandon our friends." Yuna wanted to argue, but there was no time. The cold was getting closer. She could feel the Veth commander approaching the central hub. They ran. The corridors were empty now. The survivors had barricaded themselves in safe rooms. The soldiers had fallen back after witnessing the Veth commander tear through their defenses without effort. Only the Kova remained at their posts, their awakened abilities the only thing holding the remaining Veth soldiers at bay. Yuna and Tay reached the central hub just as the Veth commander arrived from the opposite side. The creature stopped when it saw her. Its single red eye focused on her with terrible intelligence. When it spoke, its voice echoed in her mind rather than her ears. "You are the one, the awakened guardian. I felt your light from across space." Yuna stood her ground. Her small body seemed fragile compared to the monster before her. But her eyes glowed with blue fire. "You should not have come here," she said. The Veth commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your kind destroyed themselves through arrogance. You thought you could protect the galaxy, but you were always prey, hiding as predators. And now there is only one of you who remembers, one small light against infinite darkness." "You are wrong." Yuna's voice was calm. "I am not alone." The battle began. The Veth commander struck first. A wave of dark energy erupted from its body, rolling toward Yuna like a black tide. She raised her hands and met it with her own power. Blue and black collided in the air, creating explosions of light and shadow. The central hub shook. The floor cracked. The walls bent inward from the pressure. Yuna pushed harder. Her blue light expanded, driving back the darkness. But the Veth commander was strong. Impossibly strong. It had fed on psychic energy for centuries. It had hunted and consumed guardians across the galaxy. And Yuna was just one woman who had awakened her power only hours ago. The darkness pushed back. Yuna felt her shields cracking. She felt cold seeping into her mind, trying to freeze her thoughts. The Veth commander advanced slowly, each step driving her backward. "You are powerful," the creature said in her mind, "but you are also afraid. I can feel it. You have been afraid your whole life, afraid to be seen, afraid to be strong. That fear makes you weak." Yuna fell to one knee. The blue light around her flickered. She was losing. Then she heard a sound. A battle cry. A human battle cry. Tay charged. He had found a plasma cutter somewhere. It was a tool, not a weapon. It was small and weak compared to the Veth commander. But Tay did not care. He ran at the creature with everything he had. The Veth commander turned its red eye toward him. Pathetic. It raised one of its 4 arms to swat him away. But that moment of distraction was enough. Yuna closed her eyes. She reached deep inside herself, past the fear, past the doubt, past the centuries of silence. She found something there. A spark, a memory, a voice that sounded like her mother. "You are not weak. You were never weak. Now stand up and show them what we are." Yuna opened her eyes. The blue light exploded from her body with force she had never felt before. It was not just power. It was truth. The truth of who she was. The truth of who her people had always been. The Veth commander tried to raise its shields, but it was too late. Yuna's light struck it directly in the chest. The dark energy around it shattered like glass. The creature screamed, a sound that echoed through both physical space and the minds of everyone on the station. Yuna walked forward. Each step drove her power deeper into the Veth commander's body. She was not just attacking it. She was reaching inside its mind. She was pulling it apart from within. "You called us prey," she said, her voice echoing with ancient strength. "You forgot what predators look like when they stop hiding?" The Veth commander collapsed. Its red eye flickered once, twice, then went dark. Its body crumbled to dust. Outside the station, the Veth fleet began to scatter. Without their commander's psychic control, they lost all coordination. Their ships turned and fled into the darkness, vanishing back into the void they had emerged from. It was over. Yuna stood in the center of the ruined hub, breathing hard. The blue light faded from her eyes. Her body swayed. Tay reached her just as she began to fall. He caught her in his arms and lowered her gently to the ground. "You did it," he said. "You saved everyone." Yuna smiled weakly. "You helped. That distraction. It gave me the moment I needed. That was stupid of me." "Yes, very stupid." Her smile grew wider. "Very human." Around them, the station slowly came back to life. Emergency systems stabilized. Survivors began to emerge from their hiding places, and above them, through the cracked dome of the central hub, the stars shone peacefully once more. The battle was over. But the real change was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the battle. Horizon's edge was still damaged. Walls were cracked. Corridors remained sealed. Power flickered in some areas, but the station was alive. The people had survived, and slowly, carefully, they were beginning to rebuild. Yuna stood at the observation window in her new quarters. They had moved her from the tiny room in the lower decks to a proper living space on Deck 5. Commander Vorn had insisted. She had tried to refuse, but he would not listen. Through the window, she watched repair ships moving around the station's hull. Workers in spacesuits patched holes and replaced damaged panels. Life was returning to normal, or something close to it. A knock on her door. "Come in," she said. Tay entered. He looked tired, but happy. He had spent the last 3 days helping with repairs, barely sleeping, barely eating. But there was a light in his eyes that had not been there before. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired," Yuna admitted, "but better, stronger." She touched her chest, where she could still feel the power humming gently inside her. "It does not hurt anymore. The power. It feels like part of me now. It always was part of you. You just forgot." Yuna smiled. "Yes, I suppose I did." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. "There is a broadcast scheduled for later today," Tay said eventually. "The Galactic Coalition Council. They want to address what happened here." Yuna nodded. She had heard about this. The news of the battle had spread across the galaxy. The story of how a forgotten species had awakened ancient powers and saved an entire station from destruction. It was the biggest news in decades. "Commander Vorn asked me to attend," she said. "He wants me to speak. Will you?" "I do not know. I have never been good with words." "You were good enough to defeat a psychic monster. I think you can handle a few politicians." Yuna laughed. It was a small sound, but genuine. She had not laughed in years before meeting Tay. Now it came more easily. Another knock on the door. This time, it was Commander Vorn himself. He looked different than before. Smaller somehow, though his physical size had not changed. The arrogance that had once surrounded him like armor was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like humility. "May I come in?" he asked. Yuna nodded. Vorn entered and stood awkwardly in the center of the room. He was clearly uncomfortable. Apologizing did not come naturally to him. "I wanted to speak with you before the broadcast," he said. His voice was rough but sincere. "I have been thinking about what happened, about what I said to you, about how I treated your people." Yuna waited. She did not make this easy for him. She did not need to. Vorn took a deep breath. "I was wrong. I was taught from childhood that size meant strength, that power came from muscle and weapons and commanding voices. I never questioned it. I never looked beyond what I could see." He shook his head. "But you showed me something different. You showed me that true power does not care about size. It does not care about what others think. It comes from something deeper." He paused, struggling with his next words. "I cannot undo the harm I have caused. The things I said. The way I treated the Kova. But I can try to do better. I can use my voice to change how others see your people." He met her eyes directly. "If you will allow me." Yuna studied him for a long moment. She could feel his sincerity. She could sense his shame. He was not asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a chance to earn it. "I will allow it," she said finally. "But words are not enough. You must show with actions." Vorn nodded firmly. "I will. I give you my word." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "One more thing," he said. "Among my people, the Rethians, there is a gesture of deepest respect. It is only given to those we consider truly great." He placed his right hand over his heart and bowed his head low. He held the position for several seconds. When he rose, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said simply. Then he was gone. Tay looked at Yuna with surprise. "I did not expect that." "Neither did I." Yuna stared at the closed door. "But people can change. That is what I learned from you." The broadcast began 2 hours later. Every screen on Horizon's Edge showed the same image. The Galactic Coalition Council chamber, filled with representatives from dozens of species. In the center, a large holographic display showed footage of the battle. The Veth attacking, the station burning. And then, the Kova. Image after image of small gray figures doing impossible things, lifting debris with their minds, creating shields of light, standing against creatures twice their size and winning. The council speaker, an elderly being from a species Yuna did not recognize, addressed the galaxy. For centuries, the speaker said, we believed the Kova were a minor species, workers, servants. We were told they had no special abilities, no great history. But we were wrong. The truth was hidden from us, hidden by those who feared what the Kova could do. The footage changed to show historical documents, records that had been sealed for generations, evidence of the Kova's true past as guardians of the Coalition. The Kova were once the greatest protectors our galaxy had ever known. They were not destroyed because they were weak. They were destroyed because they were too strong. And rather than face this truth, our ancestors chose to erase it. The council chamber was silent. Representatives stared at their screens with shock and shame. But truth cannot be erased forever. On horizon's edge, the Kova remembered who they are. And in doing so, they saved thousands of lives. The Coalition owes them a debt that cannot be repaid. The speaker turned to face a screen where Yuna's image appeared. We are transmitting this message to all worlds. The Kova are not servants. They are not invisible. They are heroes. And from this day forward, they will be honored as such. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched. On 100 worlds, Kova, who had spent their entire lives being ignored, looked up at screens and saw themselves represented with dignity for the first time. On a distant colony, a young Kova girl sat with her family. She was only 7 years old. Her whole life she had been told she was small and weak. Her whole life she had believed it. But now she watched a woman who looked like her stand before the galaxy. A woman who had been invisible. A woman who had been forgotten. A woman who had saved everyone. The girl stood up a little taller. Back on horizon's edge, the broadcast ended. Yuna turned off the screen and sat down heavily. She was overwhelmed. She had never wanted attention. She had never wanted fame. She had just wanted to survive. Tay sat beside her. Are you okay? I do not know. Everything is changing so fast. Is that a bad thing? Yuna thought about it. She thought about the years she had spent in silence, the years she had spent believing she was worthless, the years of hiding. No, she said finally. It is not bad. It is just strange. For so long I was invisible. Now everyone can see me. Tay smiled. You were never invisible to me. Yuna looked at him. This human who had changed everything. Who had seen her when no one else would. Who had believed in her before she believed in herself. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me, for not giving up. Tay shrugged. On Earth, we have a saying. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Yuna laughed again. It was becoming easier every time. The galaxy underestimated us, she said. All of us. The small, the quiet, the forgotten. And look what happened. Yes. Yuna looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions of Kova were waking up, remembering, rising. Look what happened. That night, as the station slept, Yuna walked through the corridors she had once cleaned. She passed workers who nodded to her with respect. She passed soldiers who stepped aside to let her pass. She passed children who looked at her with wonder in their eyes. She was still small. She would always be small. But size had never mattered. The galaxy was finally learning what her people had always known. True power is not measured in height or strength or loud voices. True power comes from within, from courage, from kindness, from refusing to give up even when everyone says you are nothing. Yuna stopped at a window and looked out at the stars one last time. She was not invisible anymore. She never would be again. And somewhere, across the vastness of space, a new generation of Kova children were learning to stand tall. Too short to matter? That is what they thought. They were wrong.